Now we will move to briefing item D, community water fluoridation in Dallas. This is part 2. Sarah Standifer, our director, will get us started. And then if our panelists could also make their way down to the table as well. You can get started whenever you would like. I will say that I want to hear the full presentation. We definitely saved the bulk of the time for this, but let's be cognizant of the time that we spend on presenting versus allowing for questions and feedback, because I definitely would like to hear from questions and feedback.
So good morning, Chair and honorable members of the committee. As the council members set it up, we're back here on round 2 of our panel discussion. We've brought in another set of experts to talk with you all about data related to fluoride. Given our time constraints, I just wanted to kind of go to the very end of what you'll expect after this panel presentation. We are keeping a running log of questions and input that you've asked at the first panel and the second panel. We will come back with a briefing memo in December. At this time, in the interest of time, I'm going to pass this off. We are going to go virtually first to Professor Lamphere if the professor is on and able, and if not, we will pass it forward. Do we know if he's on virtually? The virtual's right there.
Good morning.
Professor Lamphere, I believe that's you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, we are going to hand it off to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to join you this morning. I wanted to start out with just a little background because I think it's relevant, and that is background of my own work on lead. I'm a physician certified in public health and preventive medicine. I completed my medical degree at the University of Missouri in Kansas City and my public health training at Tulane University in New Orleans. I live in Canada now, but 50 years ago, I went to Alice Landrigan Elementary School in Amarillo, Texas, and I spent my weekends climbing in Paladero Canyon. It was a very formative period of my life. For the past 25 years, I've conducted research on how lead and other toxic chemicals like pesticides and air pollution affect children's learning abilities and their risk for behavioral problems like ADHD and autism. I've served on science committees of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the Centers for Disease Control, and the American Academy of Pediatrics. Most of my studies were on lead poisoning in children, and they were the key studies used by the EPA and the Department of Housing and Urban Development to set federal standards for lead in water and dust. They were also the key studies that led the EPA, the Centers for Disease Control, and the World Health Organization to conclude that no amount of lead is safe for children. 6 years ago, Christine Till, a scientist at York University in Toronto, Canada, asked if I would help her study fluoride in a Canadian birth cohort. This was a cohort that I helped to start with over 2,000 pregnant moms following the children out to now about 10 years of age. This particular cohort, this group of moms and children, is particularly important when we're thinking about fluoride because the cities that we studied, 10 cities across Canada, include fluoridated and non-fluoridated communities. I'd like to share the results of 3 of the studies that we've completed so far. In our first study, we found that the IQ scores of boys were 4 points lower if their mothers had higher amounts of fluoride in their urine during pregnancy. The amount of fluoride in urine is a good way to measure how much a person is exposed to fluoride, but it varies day to day. We also found that the IQ scores of boys and girls were 5 points lower when they were 4 years of age if their mothers had higher levels of fluoride in their drinking water during pregnancy. An op-ed in the Dallas Morning News said that this study was deeply flawed. That's not true. We used the same methods in the fluoride study that I used in my studies on lead poisoning. Our study on fluoride was more heavily scrutinized than any of the other 300 plus studies I've published in the past 25 years. In addition, the National Toxicology Program, which is a program of the United States National Institutes of Health, concluded that our study, our fluoride study, was a high quality study. In fact, our results are consistent with most other high quality studies. 18 out of 19 high quality studies reviewed by the National Toxicology Program showed that children exposed to higher amounts of fluoride during early brain development had diminished IQ scores. Almost half of those studies had fluoride levels relevant to drinking water in fluoridated communities. That level of consistency across 18 of 19 studies is highly unusual in research and shouldn't be dismissed. In the second study, we found that women who drank tap water with higher levels of fluoride were at higher risk for hypothyroidism, a low functioning thyroid gland. That shouldn't be particularly surprising. In the past, fluoride was used to treat patients with hyperthyroidism, that is, a hyperactive thyroid. Hypothyroidism in any woman is a problem, but it's especially problematic for pregnant women because the developing fetus is wholly dependent on their mother's thyroid hormones. They don't make their own thyroid until the beginning of the second trimester. In the third study, we found that boys whose mothers had higher fluoride and lower iodine during pregnancy did even more poorly on IQ tests than boys whose mother had higher fluoride and normal iodine. Iodine, as all of you know, is a critical vitamin for thyroid hormone. Children who are born in communities with really low iodine are at risk for cretinism, a severe form of cognitive or intellectual deficit. So what can we conclude? Not all studies show that children who are exposed to higher levels of fluoride do more poorly on cognitive tests, but over 90% of high-quality studies do show that fluoride results in IQ deficits in children. In the Dallas Morning News, the authors of an op-ed said that there isn't a credible other side to the fluoride question. I disagree. The NTP, the National Toxicology Program, concluded that levels of fluoride commonly found in pregnant women are harmful to their children. I applaud Dallas City Council for asking these tough questions. Questioning is a critical part of the scientific process, and the public, especially publicly elected officials, should be involved in science. These questions, like whether pregnant women and children should be exposed to fluoride, are simply too important to leave up to scientists and public health officials. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Guys, we're going to keep order in the chambers so we can conduct business as effective as possible. And let's move on to our next panelist, please.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Griffin Cole. I practiced dentistry in Austin for 28 years, and I've been studying fluoride and water fluoridation for about 30 years now. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the rest of the council for having us here. Next slide, please. I just wanted to expand a little bit on this NTP because it was mentioned a few times at the last meeting. Next click, please. So there was actually 55 studies that they got. Now, I know there was a lot of commentary about there was a bunch of outliers, but understand there was over 80 worldwide studies on this. 30 of them were thrown out. They just took the ones that didn't meet their rigorous standards for a scientific method. So 52 of 55 studies, and all of them found decreases in child IQ with increased fluoride. Next, please. There was also some commentary about how there was a lot of meta-analyses that weren't agreeing. This is a direct quote from that report. Quote, our meta-analysis confirms results of previous meta-analyses and extends them by including newer, more precise studies. The data support a consistent inverse association between fluoride exposure and children's IQ. Next. Go to the next one, please. Thank you. Quote, several of the highest quality studies showing lower IQs in children were done in optimally fluoridated 0.7 milligrams per liter areas. Many urinary fluoride measurements exceed those that would be expected from consuming water that contains fluoride at a much higher level. So there's a lot of comments about all of these studies were showing IQ problems at higher than our normal fluoride levels, and that's not true. And in fact, all of you have a copy there in front of you of 10 of the most recent NIH-funded studies. NIH, the National Institutes of Health, was mentioned several times. That is reputable. We do like to see when they fund studies. And all 10 of those show IQ problems at levels at 0.7 milligrams per liter or lower. Last comment, the NTP cited the report's graph showing a steep drop in IQ of about 7 points over a fluoride range from 0.2 to 1.5 milligrams per liter. Next, please. So I put this up because I wanted to show that you guys can look up at any time and see what the CDC stats are on states. I know that the chair asked last time, can you compare some states and tell me what's going on? So I wanted to show you some here. So states with the lowest childhood decay are New Hampshire and Vermont, 35% and 37%. They are two of the least fluoridated states in the entire country, 43rd and 39th respectively. Now look at the next list. Washington, D.C., 100% fluoridated, 60% decay rate. Kentucky, 99.8% fluoridated, 60% decay rate. North Dakota, 96% fluoridated, 68% decay rate. The point is that you can look at all the states, whether they're fluoridated or not, and see it go both ways. So my biggest point here is that you'll see that water fluoridation has nothing to do with this. Next slide, please. So there was a lot of comments made that that we've proven that adding fluoride to our water prevents cavities, and that's actually the opposite. We've got lots of studies showing that's not true, and this was in our own journal, the Journal of the American Dental Association in 2000. John Featherstone was looking at this very issue, studied extensively, and look at two comments from his study. Fluoride incorporated during tooth development is insufficient to play a significant role in caries protection, and more importantly, fluoride's preventive action is topical, rubbing it on your teeth, rather than systemic, drinking it. Next slide, please. Here's a picture of mild to moderate fluorosis. So the CDC and HHS have been proven incorrect over the years. For years, we were told that up to 1.2 parts per million is the right level for water fluoridation. In 2015, they lowered it down to 0.7 because the rates of fluorosis were going up. Now, please understand that, and this was also mentioned last time, the NHANES survey, the National Health and Examined Nutrition Survey. They look at a lot of demographic data. They do actual physical exams and questionnaires. And now, through the latest two surveys they've done, these rates are going up between 70 and 87% fluorosis. Next slide, please. So here it is, NHANES, which is a part of CDC. They had only done 3 surveys up to this point. So if you look at this little slide here, they're looking very specifically at 12 to 15-year-olds to see, is fluorosis increasing? And up to 2011 and 12, they had only done those 3 surveys. So if you look there was about 22% of kids in that age range had fluorosis on their teeth. That's the 86 to 87 survey. Then they did a 5-year one after that, 99 to 204. That was 41%. Now they did the 2011 and 2012, and it was 65%. We've done 2 since, and now we're getting between 70 and 87%. So it just keeps going up. Next slide, please. And look at this. The Journal of the American Medical Association, just a few months ago, published this, a national study exploring the association between fluoride levels and dental fluorosis. And the findings corroborate exactly what I just showed you on that last slide. In fact, they actually quote, our results align with those of NERATH. NERATH, Lineback, and Osmondson they wrote this up in 2019 in the Journal of Dental Research. So they were showing, what is NHANES doing? What are they finding? And that's the only way that we were able to find out because it was published. And JAMA just corroborated this just a few months ago. Next slide, please. Click one more time. So I'm going to show you a few facts here on this page, and I find this one to be, all these to be very important. So there has never been a double-blinded randomized clinical trial to prove that fluoridation actually works, or is safe for that matter. That's the standard. That's the gold standard. Now, that can't even be done nowadays because fluoride's in everything, but back then it could have been. You could have actually had a double-blinded study. Next slide, or click. There's never been a long-term follow-up study to prove that it actually worked, with one exception, just south of here, San Antonio. To their credit, they did not fluoridate for many, many years. They finally gave in 2000, and 9 years later they said, well, let's see if this is working. And Metro Health Department actually looked into the poorer sections of San Antonio, because we're always told that's what this is for, right? Those who don't have access to care, those who maybe can't afford to buy spring water. So they looked at all those areas, and guess what they found after 9 years of fluoridating? They found a 13% increase in decay, not a decrease. Next click. And this is probably the most important thing, and I believe it was Councilwoman Blackman asked a very simple question. What's added to our water? It took about a minute to get the answer, but it's hydrofluorosilicic acid, period. It's not sodium fluoride that we find in toothpaste. It's not naturally occurring calcium fluoride. It is an acid byproduct from the fertilizer industry. And if you look there, they've never been FDA approved, nor have any fluoride supplements for that matter, to be ingested, and they were never proven safe prior to dumping in our water supply. Now, pro-fluoridationists don't like me to use the term that it's a waste product, but let me explain why it is a waste product. It comes from the fertilizer industry, and the EPA does not allow them to put it in the ground. You cannot put it in landfills. It's harmful. You also can't let it go up into the air, so they require them all to install scrubbing stacks to capture this acid. So it's not safe in the ground, and it's not safe in the air. Something else that was said last time, too, is that, well, hydrofluorosilicic acid, it dissociates in water just as fast as natural fluoride. That's not true. And in fact, next slide, that was disproven back in 1975 by Johannes Westendorf, who was studying this, was comparing silicofluorides to naturally occurring calcium fluoride. And not only did he see incomplete dissociation of the silicofluorides under normal conditions, but he also saw that we were blocking cholinesterases, which affect the regulation of our neurotransmitters. So we were seeing a lot of things happen in this study. He started off just looking at the anti-karyogenic effect of fluoride. He was starting off with a simple premise and got very deep into it and found those results there. So here we have an acid that does not dissociate like naturally occurring fluoride. It's not the same thing. And now we're seeing that it blocks a very important enzyme for our neurotransmitters. And if you go to the next slide, look at this. Masters and Copland in 2000, Neurotoxicology, peer-reviewed journal. They were now seeing higher venous blood lead levels in children, birth to 6. They looked at a large range there, as you can see, in 105 communities. And the results, the average blood lead levels are significantly higher in children living in communities where water is treated with silicofluorides. So it doesn't readily dissolve in water. It inhibits an enzyme that regulates our neurotransmitters. And now it increases the amount of lead in children's blood. Next slide. So this, back in 2011, in Austin, we were having the same discussion. And so I was doing a lot of research for my presentations then, and I found this on the ADA website, which you can't find anymore. I've tried. Go ahead and click it again. So it's the Paffenbarger Research Center, which I'm sure is wonderful, but I want you to see this here and just keep it right there. So this was talking about the fluoride requirements for therapeutic efficacy, meaning does it work? And look at this. After 60 years of community water fluoridation, we still do not know how much fluoride is required to prevent cavities, basically. This may be because no one has systematically performed in vitro studies that separate the significant factors under conditions that closely mimic those of the oral environment and then validated those findings in intraoral studies. This is in 2005. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about the study that is not double-blinded, but this was the largest study in 1986-87. It was a large study. It was 39,000 plus children in 84 communities, and they were looking to see, comparing those who were drinking fluoridated water versus those who weren't. And when it first came out, Carlos and Brunel were the authors, and they were looking at tooth surfaces. So please understand there's a difference between teeth, 28 is the average, and surfaces, which is about 128. And their results, as they touted, was an 18% difference in decay rate. So they said, look, these children who are drinking fluoridated water have 18% less decay. That's significant. That's a large number, and that sounds really good. But that is the relative difference, and I'm going to explain that in a second. The actual difference was only 0.6 tooth surfaces, less than one tooth surface. John Yamayanis, who was with the Safe Water Foundation, did his own look at the data, and he was looking at just the teeth. And he found a relative difference of 4%, which is small, but an absolute difference of less than 1/10 of a tooth. Now, if you go to the next slide, I'm going to show you how this works. because you can play with numbers as we know. So on the x-axis, that bottom horizontal axis, that's the age of the children, and the y-axis, that's the vertical axis, is the difference in decay rates. And if you look, there's one as high as 32, and there's one as low as 8, and the average was 18 is what they said. But please understand that the relative values are the average of all samples in each age group. So you're not looking at individual children, you're taking samples of all of it and mixing it together. Go to the next slide. This is the absolute difference. So the graphs look relatively similar, but if you look at that y-axis, those numbers are much lower. So I'm going to put them on the same graph for you. Next slide. There's your difference. So that red line at the bottom, that was the difference in decay rates. Again, 0.6%, or less than 1/10 of one tooth surface. So we're talking about adding an acid that we already know doesn't do what its intended function, is potentially very dangerous, to save less than 1/10 of one tooth surface. Next slide. I brought this up because I know this was mentioned last time, so I want to just give you a little bit more background on this because it's important. Click, please. This is in Calgary. So in 2011 is when Calgary stopped water fluoridation. And some of the people noticed, well, decay rates were going up. After a few years, they were worried it's because they stopped fluoridation. So in 2019, the City Council and pro-fluoridationists asked the O'Brien Institute, which is at the University of Calgary, to conduct a review of fluoridation and present it to us. Next slide, or click. So look at this. They published the report just a few months later, highlighting the neurotoxic risk posed to the fetus by fluoride. This was the group that they hired to review fluoridation, and they came back with this. So look what happened. Next click. The City Council voted 13-1 to cancel that presentation. We don't want to see that. They did eventually see it, though. Next slide. And this is what we have now. So 38.7% of Canadians have fluoridated water as opposed to twice that here. And Edmonton, which is fluoridated, has significantly higher decay rates than Calgary. And in fact, British Columbia, which only fluoridates, I think, 1.2% of their population, 1.2%, has far less decay. Next slide. So I want to show you this because this is how we sort of play with graphs. Now, I'm showing you the whole graph, but what they had done is showed you just the right side where it says fluoridation ends, and look at these decay rates going up. Click it, please. That's the entire graph. So go back to 2005 where you can see decay was on a steady incline there. Ending fluoridation had nothing to do with decay rates going up. So you can play with graphs a little bit there. This is the bottom line, right? So 0.7 parts per million is that's the concentration, but it's not the dose. How do we control the dose? So a baby that's being bottle fed, it's getting 80+% of his or her diet is this hydrofluorosilicic acid water. So normal mother's milk has very, very low natural fluoride, right? 0.004 parts per million. So now we compare that to 0.7, a baby can get 250 times the level of mother's milk. And one last thing, because I know Mr. Chair brought it up, and I believe it was Councilwoman Blackman as well. We need to differentiate. We keep calling everything fluoride. You know, fluorine, which is the element naturally occurring, is never alone. It always binds to something. It's extremely electronegative. It wants to join to something. Calcium fluoride is naturally occurring fluoride. Okay, that's the stuff that our body actually doesn't readily absorb. We eliminate half of it very quickly. Sodium fluoride and stannous fluoride are what they add to toothpaste. Very different. Just to give a quick apples to apples, and then I'll finish. Calcium fluoride, naturally occurring fluoride. Body does not absorb it well. We get rid of half of it very quickly. The acute lethal dose, how much calcium fluoride is needed to kill somebody, is 3,750 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. You know what the acute lethal dose is of hydrofluorosilicic acid? 125. It's 30 times less. It's not even the same animal. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I will now open it up to members for any questions. Oh, you're presenting as well? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to have to ask you guys to speed it up. We've already spent 25 minutes on presentation alone. I asked y'all that in the beginning. We have 15 minutes left of the meeting, technically, and I need members to be able to ask questions. Thank you.
All right, I'll try and speed through this. My name is John Staniland. I'm a medical doctor specializing in family medicine, been practicing in Fort Worth for 27 years. Also the team doctor at University of Arlington, University of Texas at Arlington there. I originate from Canada. Came down here because I wanted to get away from the cold there. You heard Dr. Lanfear and Dr. Cole talk about neurotoxic effects and that with fluoridation and that. I want to talk mostly about a part of the body that affects every other part of the body that can be significantly affected by the fluoride, and that's the thyroid. If you look at a periodic table going back to your high school chemistry, you'll see that fluorine is in the same family as iodine. You mix those two together and they'll displace each other. So when you put them in the body, fluoride will displace iodine off of its own receptors and block function. Now, the iodine obviously is important for thyroid function. T3, the main active thyroid hormone, is 3 iodine molecules together. It's actually the major metabolic and the hormone in the body. It's responsible for getting us up out of bed in the morning. It keeps our body temperature at 98.6. It regulates the rate at which our body burns calories, affects cardiac output, and again affects brain development, which is probably one of the more concerning things about this too. Hypothyroidism, unfortunately, is rampant in our society and is woefully underdiagnosed. There's many causes to it. Again, fluoridation is not the cause of all our problems, but it's a component there. But if we ignore fluoridation, that's to our detriment. There's been a study, I'm not sure if Dr. Lanfear talked about this, of connecting hypothyroidism with drinking fluoridated water. 65% increase in risk of hypothyroidism in pregnant women drinking fluoridated water as opposed to those drinking non-fluoridated water. The authors of that study, were saying that the findings are concerning because hypothyroidism is a known cause of brain-based disorders in children. And their comment, too, in their paper was they hope that policymakers would consider this research when evaluating the safety of community water fluoridation. Unfortunately, most people are completely unaware of the studies linking fluoridation to brain function issues. I have to be honest with you that several years ago, I didn't think much about fluoride either, but different things have occurred in my life that kind of brought that more to the forefront. And as I look more and more into it, the problems are more and more apparent. In 2017, there was an NIH-funded study that showed that for every 1 milligram per liter increase in fluoride in a pregnant woman's urine, which approximated the difference between fluoridation and non-fluoridation, it was associated with a reduction in children's IQ by an average of 5 to 6 points. In 2019, another NIH-funded study showed that babies fed with formula mixed with fluoridated water averaged 6 IQ points less than those mixed with non-fluoridated water. Losses of nonverbal IQ were even more serious, an average of 13 points. Not sure if you're familiar with what nonverbal IQ is, but to put it very simply and quickly, that equates to common sense. So you may wonder why there's so little common sense out there. That's going to have a part to do with that too. While I was preparing to do this talk, every time I look, I find more information. In that. And I found something, a 2021 paper showing that there's a clear association between fluoride and knee osteoarthritis. All these people out there getting knee replacements and all that, maybe it doesn't have to be. A 2023 study, very recent, titled Community Water Fluoridation in Pediatric Bone Fractures, showed that U.S. states with the highest proportion of fluoridated water had 2 times the rate of fractures, common types of childhood bone fractures, as opposed to the states with very little fluoridation. Data from the Public Health England, shows fluoridation equated to a 20% greater increase in hip fractures in the elderly. And any of you who have dealt with older people and all this, you know that a hip fracture is often the start of the decline of elderly people, and often translating through to death. There's more studies out there, but I won't go into that. Those of you who are similar to my age, which I'm 63, I hate to admit that, but will recall in the past people's bodies were failing, but their minds were sharp. These days, it's turning around. The bodies are doing a little better, yes, but the minds are failing. And there's many different causes for that. Again, fluoridation is not the only cause for that, but it is a component. It is showing more and more with all the new research that comes out. It's showing more and more that it's getting more difficult to ignore. You community members have an opportunity to protect and improve the health of the citizens of Dallas. And I hope that you'll consider what you've heard here today and look yourselves for more information if you need it. Unfortunately, government authorities have told us in the past that, leaded paint, leaded gas, DDT, DES, tobacco, asbestos were all safe until the scientific evidence showed that there was problems there. And then they started banning things and restricting them. We're kind of in the exact same position with fluoridation right now. You have a wonderful opportunity, and this, I don't mean to sound melodramatic, but you have a wonderful opportunity here to be on the right side of history. And I thank you for giving us the time to speak with you.
Yes, thank you, Doctor. Thank you all for all of your presentations today. I'll open it up now for any members. Ms. Schultz.
Thank you. What became very clear in the last presentation and in the research that you've sent is that if we had adequate pediatric, particularly pediatric dental hygiene programs throughout the city, and that was said in the last program, that the need for this might be somewhat diminished. And so I just want to make that statement that's very clear that we are definitely, I think we all understand that fluoride is something that's for those people who are of the higher socioeconomic, in the sense that they get better dental care, they can afford to have better dental care, then that the levels of fluoridation, I don't know what would be needed. If I remember from the last presentation, the doctor said that may be true. So I just wanted to verify that fact, because if we want to get to the source of the problem, whether or not we continue with fluoride, let's solve the problem first. And so I would like to see if our staff could find out whether or not that was, if I remembered that accurately, and let's move in that direction, and then we can deal with whether or not we continue in this sense, because if everybody gets proper dental hygiene, do we still need this? I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz. Ms. Willis?
Thank you. And to build on that point, when we received the presentation, I did some research on some of this in a couple of the areas cited, like North Dakota and Kentucky. They have coverage through Medicaid or whatever, but there's so many barriers to receiving dental health care that contributed to it. So you've got a lot of other factors. Just because it's available doesn't mean someone can get there. So going back to the presentations, on page 6, there's something has been pulled out from a draft meta-analysis manuscript on fluoride in April 2023. So I went and followed your footnote, and I was really concerned to see a letter from Dr. Kathleen Gray, the chair of this NTP Board of Scientific Counselors, who called out something from the National Academy of Sciences and Engineering and Medicine that is considered the gold standard for providing independent and objective advice on complex scientific issues, who have asked specifically that things like this not be pulled out and put forth as fact. And it said NTP ignored the recommendation. Instead, the latest version is full of non-contextualized statements about potential associations and the evidence of being unclear. In one area, NTP even states lower concentrations of fluoride may support reduced IQ in humans without offering any data or context to support this claim. You have got the leading authority imploring this group to not put this forth because it has not achieved the peer review that it should. So since you're putting it on the record, I'm putting this on the record. And I went through and looked at these. I've got to say that in coming before a governing body of the 9th largest city in America and not footnoting some of these things is so disappointing. I mean, this was the opportunity to bring the A game. Now, my colleagues may not know that in my former life in marketing, I worked with Johnson & Johnson Medical on wound care and have helped them prepare their medical posters for a global audience. And you don't cherry pick things, you look at results and conclusions. And so that's where you start. That's where you get the information. And so to use the studies you called out on Calgary and Edmonton, where it's a great experiment. It was actually done in 2021, that prevalence of caries in the primary definition was significantly higher in Calgary, where fluoride was stopped, than in Edmonton, where it's still fluoridated. And the conclusion, which is what we should all be looking at, is our findings are consistent with an adverse impact of fluoridation cessation on children's dental health in Calgary, and to point to the need for universal, publicly funded prevention activities, including, but not limited to, fluoridation. You call out Featherstone. The conclusion, the headline to draw from this is caries progression or reversal is determined by the balance between protective and pathological factors. Fluoride, the key agent in battling caries, works primarily via topical mechanisms. Brunel and Carlos, the results suggest that the water fluoridation has played a dominant role in the decline in caries and must continue to be a major prevention methodology. So it goes on and on. We've also got something that was shown in our last round of this about in America, in Alaska, in Juneau, in Anchorage, where one city decided to end fluoridation, and 9 years later, the expense on cavity treatments had increased 47% in Juneau, while it increased only 5% in Anchorage, where there was fluoridation. So, you know, to come before us and pull out little pieces here and there when this was your moment is just disappointing to me. And so it forced me to go in and do a lot of research that didn't even start with a footnote that middle school presentations have. And so I just want my colleagues to understand this because I do feel like we've explored this. I took it very seriously to dig into this. I really did. And what I'm coming up with is not changing the recommendation of our county health official, of our federal health officials. I think Dr. Wong might be online. I don't know. He's not. I'm not sure. Okay. Anyway, I had to clarify this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Willis. Was there any response?
Yeah, I can respond to all of it. I mean, I have 15 minutes. You want me to footnote everything? I mean, or should I say that it's one of the top 10 health achievements of the 20th century, and that would be more scientific? I can talk about this all day with you. The science is there. Adding hydrofluorocarbon, it does not prevent decay. It just doesn't. And the science is clear on this. And John Featherstone, he would agree with that. I didn't cherry pick anything. That's why I gave you numbers, actual numbers, instead of saying it's 25% less decay. That's nonsense. You play with numbers. I'm showing you. 2.79 surfaces is what the non-fluoridated kids, what the fluoridated kids had. 3.25 is what the non-fluoridated, that is less than 1/2 surface. That's what this is all based on, that huge study in 86, 87. We need to be very clear about numbers. In those statements, that's from the NTP, that's from the program. And by the way, that report was blocked for a year by guess who? Health and Human Services. They knew it was damaging to water fluoridation. So we can get into all this if you want. I'm happy to. I'll address any question you have. But let's not, you don't need to point fingers at me because you think I didn't give you enough footnotes. We can talk about this all day.
Well, to be fair, she's a duly elected member of this body, and her opinion of expectation of the type of materials we should be given to prepare for any type of briefing is substantial to hear. So I in no way fault her for giving you those opinions. Maybe this is something that could be handled differently next time. And then we can move forward from that. There's no reason to go into a tit for tat.
You were all provided with some scientific articles in full, and we can't make copies of all of them, but I did give you some full articles, not just that first page. All of you got the 10 studies that were NIH funded, showing exactly what we said about the IQ deficits. They're all NIH funded. I mean, we can do this all day.
And to be fair, the sources that were cited just by Councilmember Willis were from the same reports that you were referencing. So I think that there's just a simple request for there to be more transparent context to what is being cited in, and I believe I mentioned this even last week or last month. This is not an attack on any one particular, but if we're meant to balance out two opposing sides to an argument, as policymakers, we should be given as much transparent research to sift through to do that. And if we do some sifting of our own to find that there was a lack of context in what was cited, intent is, of course, going to be questioned. So I think that there's some validity in hearing the statement that this should have been where the A game was. And instead of allowing for there to be this waste of time in talking about what an expectation was and what should have happened, we could be talking about the merit and the substance of what you put into your report. And that's not what's occurring now. So that should be the takeaway that you get from this feedback. In addition to that, I do have a couple of questions. I do not believe that there has been any type of dispute from any of the opposition that fluoride, naturally occurring, I would say, plays a role, especially topically, in its impact towards teeth decay. That's an accurate statement?
Calcium fluoride, you mean?
Natural occurring fluoride, sure. Yes.
So,
and I think that a lot of what I have heard from feedback from the public and what I've been able to sift through from hearing from medical professionals on both sides of the argument is that it seems to be the most concern with the actual supplement that is used to hit those natural numbers. I think that when I dug further in, and I've talked with Sarah about this in DWU, that the cities that we've seen take action to take it out of their water have a natural occurring level of fluoride that's much higher than those who have fell to be, I guess, dependent on a supplement. Is that accurate as well?
Yeah, so you're saying where there's high amounts of naturally occurring fluoride.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, and so with that said, I'm curious to see what other practices are being used with the research that y'all have done that that is not what would be considered a byproduct or be considered hydrofluoric acid?
Hydrofluorosilicic acid.
Hydrofluorosilicic acid.
It's a mouthful.
What alternatives are there, I guess, and what other practices are seeking a natural occurring fluoride, a calcium fluoride, if I know it has to be bound to something? What other practices are being used in place of what I really hear the biggest concern from any opposition is the fact that it is the particular supplement that's being used?
So are you saying like in organized dentistry, what are they doing, or just in general, what can be done?
I would say, I guess, if this is an additive, is there an alternative additive that is a natural occurring or something that's comparable to a calcium fluoride?
No, I don't think you need to add anything to the water, is the whole point of this. I mean, they are working on like some microcrystalline hydroxyapatite toothpastes that have the same effect as topical fluoride. They are working on things that have no fluoride at all, not even topically. But
well, I'd like to just push back on what you just said, because you told me that it was accurate to state that there is a higher level of natural occurring fluoride in places that don't see it necessary to supplement.
Right.
So you can't dispute the fact that you have gone on record to say that there is a benefit to a level of fluoride at all in the water.
That's not what I said at all. I said there are places that have high amounts of calcium fluoride. Now, those places like in West Texas say you see more of the fluorosis on the teeth. And it doesn't make the teeth stronger. Please understand, it makes it more brittle. You can chip it away with just a simple Explorer instrument. So no, I don't think you need to add anything to the water supply to have good oral health. It's unnecessary. Diet, home care, those are the things that we don't talk about. We don't need to add an acid to the water.
That's not my question, and I understand that that's where your stance is. That's why I didn't ask you that, because you've already made that clear. What my question is the fact that there is correlation between cities who have opted out of adding fluoride supplement that has a higher level of natural occurring fluoride. With that said alone, there's some truth to the fact that it being present, whether it's natural occurring or not, and I'm not talking about the byproduct. The natural occurring fluoride that exists, if it needs to be supplemented to hit the same results that what we've seen from those. The reason I'm bringing this up is that I think that it on the surface begs the question and raises somewhat of a valid argument that we've got cities who have decided not to have this. Well, then it makes you wonder why. How can they get away with it? Why don't numbers show from what we're hearing from? And then when you see that there is a higher level of natural occurring fluoride in their water, that they are afforded the opportunity to not have to supplement it. That's why what I'm asking is that I don't think that there's a question about what I've heard from y'all or from last month's presenters, that there is a benefit to fluoride on your teeth.
Topically, yes.
Topically. And there's not been a dispute that natural occurring fluoride being ingested is the issue. It's the supplement.
No, there's still a dispute on that. We still don't want people to be exposed to high amounts of naturally occurring fluoride. You still get fluorosis. You still have damage to the teeth. That's the whole point of this. So when cities stopped, like San Antonio, they didn't fluoridate forever. They finally did. Looked after 9 years, higher cavities. So what was the point of that experiment? It didn't do what you intended it to do. You can have high naturally occurring fluoride and have fluorosis. That doesn't mean that's a good thing to your teeth. And so if a city says, well, we have, like say in Dallas, it's I think 0.3 parts per million, so you want to supplement it up to 0.7 or do already. Why? You don't need to. It has no beneficial effect to the teeth when taken systemically. That's the whole point.
If it's naturally occurring and you're saying that there's no place for it at all, is your suggestion to not drink water?
No, you have no choice, right? If it's naturally occurring, you drink it, you get the fluorosis, that's just the way it is. That's where you live. Now, you can have filters and all that or drink spring water if you have access to that. You can avoid it if you can afford to do it. But no, I'm not saying that at all. You have no choice at that point if that's where you live and you have to drink tap water.
Well, thank you very much. I see... there's something wrong with your audio, Doctor.
Can you hear me okay now?
No, there's something wrong with the audio. And so I apologize, but it sounds very broken up. I'm going to reach out to you, Doctor, after this and see if I can get anything that you wanted to put on record. I'll also speak with Sarah Standifer in DWU, who is going to prepare a overall summary from both last month's presentation and this month. I want to thank y'all for y'all's time. I personally would like to just say for the public that I think that this is important. I think this is important for any policy work. I 100% do not believe that any policy making should be done in a vacuum. I think that it's important to hear if we've heard consistently from the public about concerns to really dig through and sift that. I see we have some representatives from our last month's presentation. I want to thank y'all as well. I think that this gives us the tools that we need as policymakers to really sift through the information that we have, to do some digging of our own into the research, and to make as educated of a decision as we can. I know that this regularly has come up in the past. It just hasn't with us sitting in these seats. So it's important for us to have all of the tools necessary to make the right decision. So thank y'all so much for y'all's time. Thank y'all for y'all's contribution to today's panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Standifer.
Thank you.
I will now move on. We have one final item. It was a briefing by memo, and this is for the Cultural Organization Program contracts with our Office of Arts and Culture. Are there any comments or questions, members? Ms. Willis?
Thank you. Just have one quick question.
Good morning.
Good morning. So on our program contracts for 23-24, it says the objective is to provide an annual season of programming for residents and visitors of Dallas. And so I just want to know what our mechanism is to follow up to be sure that objective is delivered upon. Do we get an annual report from each of these 60 some odd agencies, or how does your office follow up on this?
Hi there, Glenn Ayers, Assistant Director for Arts and Culture. So throughout the year, we would collect monthly reports, final reports that we sort of compare to the application process every year. And so we get sort of live updates monthly from our organizations as to how many events and attendance metrics that they're meeting every month.
Is it consolidated, and then you all take that and report back? And I just may not remember getting this report.
Yeah, so usually at the end of every year, we sort of consolidate all of those monthly reports, send those back to the organizations to kind of clean up and finalize, and then we're able to use those as sort of our final stamp for the year and report out on those. Typically, those reports are sent out for our commission meetings that we'll have with our Arts and Culture Advisory Commission, but we're happy to give those numbers to you as well.
Well, and it may be fine to have it live at the commission, but then the next question is when people re-up or reapply, is that used as a factor engaging who we are awarding our contracts to?
Yes, so we do look, I'm sorry. Yes, we do look at our previous year to our new year as a means of seeing sort of how our growth is year over year as a part of a general comparison to see how we're doing, and then we kind of go from those metrics.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Willis. Ms. Schultz?
Thank you. I just want to congratulate you. I understand this was a unanimous vote by the committee, and so you really did your homework and you did a great job, and well done. Thank you.
Mr. Gracie.
Just wanted to make a comment. You know, Cliff, when I was with the city, this was one that was written near and dear, and how to continue to see the evolution and the inclusion in this program. I'm excited to see, so I was really pleased to see this memo. So just good job. Keep up the great work. Thank you.
Is there anyone virtual that has any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll just echo thank you all for this. This is extremely important, I think, for not only the organizations that it benefits, but the public that those organizations benefit. So allowing for this equitably to be an investment in making arts more available is something that I think the body that y'all have before y'all now is going to be extremely supportive of. So thank y'all for y'all's work and love to see this continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, there's no other business for today's committee meeting. The time is now 11:14, and the Quality of Life Arts and Culture is adjourned.